And hello, everybody. It is Friday, June the 10th. Uh, and no, I am not redoing this a second time because I forgot to hit go live the first time around. But my name is Wai Ting, and I'm here to lead today's post daily news. John Pollock will be back with me tonight for Rewind a SmackDown. It's a regular start time for AEW Rampage tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern. So John and I will be back at 11 p.m. for patrons of the Post Wrestling Cafe live, as well as in archive form if you choose to listen to the show, maybe on Saturday morning. But we will be talking about tonight's WWE SmackDown and AEW Rampage cards a little bit later. But joining me to talk about all of the news, as well as some of the other shows coming up this weekend, Bruce Lord. Welcome back, Bruce.
Oh, thanks for having me back, Way. I was saying just before we got started, I kind of feel like I'm in the Andrade Joker spot, from this past Wednesday. Just not anybody that was on anybody's mind, but just sure, fine. That's inoffensive, I suppose. We can roll with this.
Yeah, and I think much like Andrade, everybody pleasantly happy to see you. I would say, wanting you to perhaps go over in the end, and maybe you are the casino battle royal winner in all of our hearts for being here today. So thank you, Bruce, very much. We have quite a bit of news to get to, and maybe let's just get started here because our first story of the day comes to us from Page 6, who have an exclusive stating that WWE boss Vince McMahon has been shopping around a memoir. Now, this is something that I guess is relatively unknown, and they are saying that it is essentially a memoir about building the WWE. And what's also interesting is that there is another book that's coming out later on in 2023 called Ringmaster that is said to be unaffiliated with Vince McMahon. And it almost feels like this is his way of, as usual from Vince, trying to capture the narrative on his own. This comes, of course, along with, several other projects dealing with Vince McMahon that are set to release in the coming months and years. So, Bruce, what do you think about all this? Are you interested in a book about Vince? And what do you think about, like, the man himself being a lot more public with his career and life at this point?
Well, excuse me. I think you yourself just kind of, pointed out what's really at work here is that there's obviously this deep, long-standing fascination with what exactly happens, in that man's head, including, from writers, commentators, and wrestling critics and journalists who I think are, quite critical of at least some of the recent history of, Vince as a booker and things like that. John has been saying for years, yes, obviously, the dream interview for anybody. Um, you know, Given that, I think that it makes sense from a WWE perspective to sort of try to get out ahead of any attempt to present or portray Vince in anything other than, the positive, glowing, the light, the man who made wrestling mainstream, the most successful wrestling promoter of all time. So, there's a certain number of people, I'm sure, for whom a, WWE authorized, theoretically, presumably ghostwritten, but, signed off by Vince accounting of his own life is going to be really interesting and kind of give a, oh, right, sure, fine. I have a sense of where all of these things fit. Obviously, we are not going to be getting, the full and unvarnished truth in that sort of account. I don't think we're going to get Vince's own memories of, going to the police department to deal with the Snuka situation or anything like that in a WWE sponsored book. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure it'll do somewhat well for them, but obviously the cynical part in me is not going to be looking for any sort of hard hitting insight there. I think I'm trying to remember who it was, if it was Alex Greenfield or somebody once opined that there already is a really good Vince McMahon biopic out, and it's There Will Be Blood. So, uh, make of that what you will.
Succession is a great TV show based
Mhm.
based on him as well.
Yep.
Just a little bit about the other book that's set to be released about him, the unauthorized one. It is by Abraham Reisman, who was also responsible for the Stan Lee book that recently came out here to, I think, some pretty good reviews here. True Believer: The Rise and Fall of Stan Lee is the name of that one. So I mean, I think, Bruce, at least, between the two, I'm sure we'll be reading both of them. Between the two, we may get just that much more of a clear understanding of who this person is. I find it fascinating that, like, through the years, I feel Vince has been so guarded about doing interviews, even appearing like, at the Hall of Fame and wanting people to speak about him at the Hall of Fame, to now it's seemingly we're going to get, a real strong abundance of stories either from the man himself or about the man. So he will be a topic of discussion. Does it give you any indication of like, what is this guy like looking to wrap up his career now? Like, what do you think?
I mean, there's, Brandon and a couple of other people have, intimated that the real big, shift away from the theoretical succession plan that seemed to be in place has made some, people who are real close observers of it, maybe having them give a little bit more credulity to the idea of an actual sale, happening at this point. In which case, you sort of can see why there would be perhaps an interest in Vince sort of, cleaning his hands off, putting kind of the final period on his career, and then sort of retiring if he chooses to do so. Now, again, that seems to run so contrary to everything that he has always said in the past about, I want to be like the poison pill in some buyout. I want to be the bone sticking in the craw of a dinosaur, or whatever strange analogy it was that he, used. I want to have this entity like taken away from me, kicking and screaming, and pried from my cold dead hands. Whether or not he's changed his mind about that in the last 10 or so years is a really interesting question. And this could be, as much of an outward sign of that sort of change in thinking as we are likely to get.
I'm just going to keep nodding my head as if I understand what credulity actually means. But thank you very much, Bruce, and thank you to all of you guys who are currently sending in super chats. Of course, if you're watching us live, you have the ability to ask a question or just simply state a comment if you want to support the Post Daily News. So that is available for all you guys. Our next story is a little bit of an update on Cody Rhodes, everybody's favorite subject, it seems, this week. This comes to us from Brandy, who says the doctor just repaired Cody's pectoral tendon, which was torn completely off the bone. Successful surgery. He is on the road to recovery now. So, I mean, pretty much right from the source here, from Brandy Rhodes. And we haven't really had a chance to maybe get some of your thoughts yet, Bruce, on the whole Cody Rhodes match, as well as the entire situation. And also, how do you think they'll be handling these sort of updates going forward?
I mean, I think being upfront about it and, having it's obviously a question that's going to be on everyone's mind. And, as, you guys yourself were talking about, look, none of us, except for Alex, are doctors and are not necessarily, qualified to be able to speculate as to what sort of a time frame we might be looking at here. But, for better or for worse, that, really awful injury lent itself to this, kind of career defining moment that Cody was able to enjoy. And obviously, please understand that I'm not trying to say, oh, you can't call, you cannot call something like this a blessing in disguise. But given that it's happened, it is an opportunity now, and obviously I'm sure that Cody is just heartbroken, that this happened just as his big main roster, run was finally taking off. Uh, there's an opportunity here to make him an absolutely like face of the franchise level star when he comes back from this. And look, I am somebody who is as critical as anyone of the way that the WWE handles its booking of pretty much all of its talent, save for your Brock and your Roman, and that's kind of really it over the past few years. But up until now, I think they've done a very good job with Cody, and if they can keep that up and launch him straight into the main event whenever he comes back, there's a lot to be done here. Obviously, um, Roman and Rock is a match that you obviously as a one-off is fantastic and exciting, and it's been in the works for God coming up on feels like it's been 10 years at this point that there's been speculation about this. So obviously you have to, if you can get that to work with Dwayne's schedule and everything, obviously you make that happen. But that's a temporary stopgap, right? That's a 1 month or a 2 month build or program there. With Cody and Cody versus Roman, you have the opportunity to actually have two equally credible, equally charismatic, stars who are comfortable working within the confines and the structure and the style that the WWE wants in its main events. And that's not something that comes along every day, right? We've seen how often, their own system is unable to produce a talent of this sort. So yeah, again, I don't want to sound like I'm just sort of saying, oh, this could be the best thing for Cody Rhodes' career. Obviously, it sucks. It's super physically painful, I'm sure. It's got to be horribly depressing for him. But if they don't screw this up, there's a lot of money to be made here.
Certainly, absolutely. And, again, it will be interesting to see if they try to keep his name alive up there. We know he is a man who's far more talented than just what he's able to offer in the ring. Do they, when he's at least a bit more healthier, do they bring him back onto the road for him to possibly do commentary? Do we get more of these updates? Do we get some semblance of a reality show, perhaps documenting, his path? What do they do to keep his name alive out there? Or is this enough? Like he went out in such an incredibly strong way. You can make the argument that not doing anything from now until potentially January is really all you need to do. Just, sign the contract with U2 and just, get those videos ready and you're already set, right? But I have to say, like you said, Bruce, there is never a good time for somebody to be injured. The pain that the man must have gone through and is going through and will go through is almost unimaginable, especially looking at the way that injury looked. But if you're going to get injured, the fact that it was the type of injury that still allowed him to be cleared to perform, and I know that's been debated, but I've heard enough opinions from actual doctors now for me to feel comfortable that in a professional wrestling cooperative context, that was fine. I'm not going to say necessarily it was safe. There was risk, but I don't think it was as egregious as maybe, some of us are thinking. The fact that, it's the main event in the Hell in a Cell, and the fact that the recovery time, is at least expected, according to previous instances of these fully torn pecs, to line up perfectly with your path to WrestleMania. I mean, in many ways, they can definitely turn this negative into a major positive for all of them. So we shall see. That is the latest on Cody Rhodes here. But that's not the only injury and surgery update that we have to a WWE roster member, because Bruce Prichard, everybody, is also heading for surgery. This comes to us from the Something to Wrestle With podcast, as well as a transcript thanks to Wrestling News. So Bruce Prichard is going to get surgery for his torn rotator cuff. On the latest Something to Wrestle With podcast, WWE exec Bruce Prichard described his injury that will require to get surgery. I have a torn rotator cuff. The plan is to get it fixed next Wednesday. 6-month rehab. I had colitis, changed my diet, started working out, started getting healthy, and started feeling good. But my shoulder was bugging me, so I was going in for treatments for my shoulder. Then one day I look in the mirror and my entire right arm is just black and blue. I mean, the ugliest thing you've ever seen in your life. I'm like, what is this? It didn't hurt. As a matter of fact, my shoulder pain had gone away. So I went to the doctor and said, hey, what the hell is this bruising from? They looked at it and said, you tore your bicep clean off the bone from the shoulder. I'm like, well, how the hell did I do that? I mean, I did nothing that I could say, oh, wow, boy, I heard a pop or I felt that. Nothing like that. So evidently he feels great. He's been getting into shape. He's feeling stronger than ever, but he will be going in for surgery just to kind of take care of some pain that has gotten more and more intense, it seems, and is not going away. So, of course, we wish Bruce Prichard all the best in his recovery. Do you expect this to have any impact in perhaps, his day-to-day?
I mean, I can't really necessarily see it being a big deal apart from the actual, surgery and, maybe a couple of days on the couch after that. As somebody who has dealt with rotator cuff, as a Bruce, I suppose, who has also dealt with rotator cuff injuries in the past, certainly nothing that severe. They suck. They're often it's often kind of chronic pain. And to be frank, it often comes, he's mentioning they're working out. It often comes because you're kind of overextending yourself, when you're having a really good time lifting and everything, and you push it a little bit far and you don't even notice that you're doing it. So yeah, no, absolutely all the best to him.
Vince, while you're signing that contract for YouTube, make sure you get a second track ready for Bruce Prichard and his comeback story. Okay. This is our second biggest babyface possibly in the works here. AEW Dynamite this week. AEW topped cable amongst the NBA against the NBA finals on ABC. So despite NBA competition, Dynamite drew 939,000 viewers with a 0.34 in the 18 to 49 demo. The demo was lower than usual, but we have ultimately, I think what matters probably to Turner the most is whether or not Dynamite is topping cable. And yes, it looks like they did with that 0.34. So thank you very much, Brandon Thurston from WrestleNomics and Showbuzz Daily for that information. So this week, Casino Battle Royal, John Moxley versus the winner. No MJF, and didn't necessarily seem like it was needed, at least to beat the competition. Yeah, any thoughts on Dynamite?
I mean, from tracking what you and John were speculating about, Brandon's thoughts about this, Voices of Wrestling, pretty much everybody I track who I trust with regards to ratings talk was sort of anticipating that this would be kind of a blowout week for them, that they just pretty much get crushed by the NBA game. And obviously, I think the drop in the demo is indicative of probably the NBA audience. So there's a little bit of that, but this has to be viewed as kind of a pleasant surprise, I would think. You have no Punk, you have no Danielson. I don't think anybody was expecting MJF. So yeah, you've got the Moxley thing announced. So I'm wondering if this was just interest in sort of the chaos and the uncertainty that the Punk situation had created, right? Where we were all talking, on Friday about just like how confusing and how seemingly contradictory the announcement of what was going to be happening on Wednesday actually was. So I think there might have been at least just some sort of like, what exactly is going on here? What will this look like? Wait, is Moxley wrestling tonight, or is that at like there were so many kind of questions, and I'm wondering if that was sort of just kind of almost the not quite a car crash, but sort of just the chaos and confusion created by the title situation was maybe what kept people tuning in.
So we will keep an eye, of course, on the NBA Finals as they head into Game 4 coming up. Let's talk a little bit about some of the shows coming up this weekend, Bruce, because our first, I would say, maybe the biggest show that's coming up this week is the latest iteration of New Japan Pro Wrestling's Dominion. And this happens, sorry if I could just get this damn thing to load. June 12th, yes, and so Osaka Joe Hall. Sorry, everybody. On New Japan World, the headlining bout for the evening is Jay White taking on Kazuchika Okada for the New Japan Pro Wrestling IWGP Heavyweight Championship. What's your interest level, Bruce? For the match itself and also for the card in general.
I'm a little bit. I view myself as somebody who's probably a little bit higher on Jay White than the average, kind of North American New Japan viewer. I really like him as a, this reactive, cunning, defensive style of wrestler, and I find, that he sort of produces matches that are maybe a little bit different from what the main event New Japan House style often looks like, and I always enjoy his matches with Okada. I was looking forward to this match. It wasn't the biggest match, that you could possibly make in New Japan right now. I have no idea, obviously, if Adam Page's call out of Okada on Wednesday was specifically planned, like make sure you call out Okada, or if that was just sort of him going off book and the Cole thing was just sort of a save. But man, that did sort of let, a little bit of the window out of the sails of this main event. I don't think any of us were really ready to, put money on White to walk away with this. And now that seems even less likely, right? Heading into Forbidden Door, the appeal of this, and we've seen this, when New Japan has booked North American shows, North American audiences who enjoy New Japan want to see, New Japan originals. We want to see Okada. Tanahashi is a megastar whenever he performs in North America. Having been to a couple of North American New Japan shows, the pops and reactions that, your Ishis, your Gotos, everybody gets is such that, look, as much as Jay White is a, New Japan original and went through the Young Lion system and everything, there's still that prestige that comes with being, the sort of star that you only see, on New Japan shows. So it should be a decent match, I'm sure. But I think we can all sort of see where this is going. There are some interesting question marks on the rest of the card as well that have me, I think, tuning into it. As it happens, I've got a whole bunch of midterm marking, and I kind of have the house to myself this weekend, so I might actually just drink a bunch of coffee, stay up late, and actually watch this one live. See if the dog minds that or not. But yeah, I think I'm going to try to stay up with this one.
On the rest of the card, we have the co-main event or semi-main event, I should say, is for the IWGP United States Heavyweight Championship, and this is taking place between Juice Robinson, the current champion, taking on Sonata, the former champion who had to relinquish, and Will Ospreay, who challenged but I don't believe got pinned. Now, this one is particularly interesting because New Japan just released a video last night where Juice was teasing that he would not be able to make the defense due to his recovery from appendicitis. In this video, he also claims that he was currently in the U.S., but it was done very much under his Bullet Club character. He was saying how, these two should, Sonata and Ospreay should just basically fight for nothing, and then eventually he will fight one of the two. I don't know if this is storyline or not. I mean, the fact that New Japan would just simply put this out there and not update their cards and not make an announcement beforehand if they knew that this talent was not available seems to suggest to me that this is in the works for some sort of angle and that Juice will be there, because I believe last time when the injury was announced, it seemed like he was actually in Japan, or at least that's what it was made to seem to look like. So yeah.
Yeah, we saw obviously with the whole Juice joining the Bullet Club thing that he's very committed to being able to do kind of long cons and pull off swerves and everything like that. And if this is one of those, cool, that's fine. In terms of the title itself, I mean, presuming that he actually does legitimately have appendicitis. I don't know that we're necessarily concocting that out of whole cloth. You'd have to imagine that the title would have to go to someone else, I would presume.
You think so? Because Juice is relatively fresh.
Oh, he's very fresh,
belt.
but I'm just saying if there is like he was intimating the video, that he hasn't yet had the surgery but needs to. So I guess the question is like, oh, can he go through with the match and get the surgery afterwards? But depending on what you want to be doing with Ospreay at Forbidden Door, and the degree to which you want to kind of keep him kind of working within North America, I think there's a lot of interesting matchups to be done there. And obviously, I've really enjoyed the whole, Ospreay continuously having these like semi-controversial, fucked or split second finishes, where he now feels as though he has a legitimate gripe about having, being kept out of the title picture or having the title snaked away from him and everything. So, I'd be interested in either that story continuing on or just giving the title to Ospreay and then having him go to Forbidden Door, or maybe he's going to be in a mixed tag. I'm not sure. And do some more stuff in North America with that belt. Theoretically, at least, from what I remember, that is what this belt was initially supposed to be, right? This kind of, bulwark or whatever for New Japan in North America, which is kind of what I'm hoping that this whole Atlantic thing in AEW will be like. If it's defended in New Japan or defended in other companies, or, people from other companies come in to challenge for it, that would give it some identity. But that's a whole other kettle of fish, not to move away from Dominion.
And let's not forget Will Ospreay himself coming off of a kidney infection injury that he's been having to take some time off with. Of course, we saw him on Dynamite and saw that he was at least able to deliver a hidden blade, and is seemingly able to travel across the world now, having to go from Dynamite over to Japan, of course. So we look to see what sort of shape he is in his return. I'm sure it will be nothing less than spectacular. Also on the card, we have Tama Tonga versus Machine Gun Carl Anderson. Of course, Carl Anderson was off of the Best of the Super Juniors finals after testing positive for COVID. So that will be a match, between two best friends, former OG Bullet Club members. And I think for me, I'm quite interested in this one just to see what Carl Anderson under a New Japan Pro Wrestling context in a singles capacity looks like, because I mean, arguably that was at least the in-ring peak of his career to many.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've really enjoyed the face run from Tama. I thought he had a really good G1 showing this past year. So I think he's a good person to be carrying the Never right now. But yeah, I'm very interested to see whether, to be frank, whether we're going to get Good Brother Carl or whether we're getting Machine Gun. Carl, and I think we'll be able to tell in this match.
And that match contested for the Never Openweight Championship, currently held by Tama Tonga. This will be his first defense. Also, we have got the King of Pro Wrestling Championship. This one, I think everybody's been waiting on with bated breath to know which stipulation that they will be going with. We outlined it for everybody on Post Daily News. It will either be the 10-minute unlimited pinfall scramble or Tai Chi's idea of only 2 finishers being used in order to get to a total accumulated pinfall of 10. And if it's confusing you, don't worry about it, because we have an answer. Shingo Takagi's idea of a 10-minute unlimited pinfall scramble, say that 10 times, 10-minute unlimited pinfall scramble has currently won with 55.5% of the vote. So basically they get 10 minutes. Whoever, like, every pinfall, every near fall counts. Whoever gets the most at the end of 10 minutes wins the King of Pro Wrestling Championship.
The previous match, I was one of the people who was a little bit actually optimistic about that previous match. I thought, like, on paper, this could be pretty great, and it was. It was absolutely the best and most interesting thing that they've done with the King of Pro Wrestling, and I think it's smart to have a rematch that sort of, it's a slight variation on that theme, and obviously, I think guys who are as hard hitting but also as creative as these two will be able to add some slightly different flavor to it, while also keeping that same sort of frantic scoreboard counting intensity that made the first match so interesting. So as long as they kind of are able to keep the register and style of the King of Pro Wrestling matches in this sort of area, rather than just all the silliness, I'll keep watching, and I'll keep being invested in them.
We also have the tag titles being defended between the Great Khan and Jeff Cobb, taking on Bad Luck Fale and Chase Owens. And also the Never 6-Man Tag Team Championships are being defended by Suzuki-gun, consisting of Desperado, Kanemaru, and Zack Sabre Jr. Challenging for the championships against champions, the House of Darkness, Evil Show, and Yujiro, the good-looking Yujiro himself. But I know everybody's main event, okay? At least on this side of the pond. The real reason people will be tuning into New Japan Pro Wrestling's Dominion on Sunday morning, we will find out who advances in the AEW Interim Championship Eliminator Tournament. Hiroshi Tanahashi, or everybody's dark horse favorite. The betting lines are going crazy right now. Can he, pull the upset and go on to face Jon Moxley at Forbidden Door? Hiroki Goto. Do you have a pick, Bruce?
Oh, the G in Goto stands for going to the U.S. this time. Way no, even more so than the Jay White situation. This is such a lame duck match. Unfortunately, we already had the Tanahashi walked out onto an AEW stage. We know, like I said before, everybody knows that he's always received wonderfully within the United States, and that's not to say that there isn't the possibility of Goto having a cool match on Forbidden Door. You throw Goto in there with Eddie Kingston, and yeah, absolutely, take my money. But yeah, I mean, we know what's happening here. It'll be a good match, but we know what's going on.
So that is New Japan Pro Wrestling Dominion. I believe John and I will be speaking about it on Monday, so do tune in then for some of
We're
our
not
thoughts.
even going to mention the Gallows versus Yano match.
Well, we could go through
barn burner.
Hey,
no, I have no.
We
takes.
can go through every single match on this card if you really wanted to, but there's a lot of it.
That's fine.
And I will save the audience from our dissection of Yano versus Doc Gallows here, because we need time, John. Sorry, I'm so used to John on the other end, but we need time to talk about NWA's latest pay-per-view that is coming up this weekend, NWA Always Ready. Now, I'm not been keeping up with new NWA at all, but you have, Bruce. So this will be a great opportunity for maybe you to speak about some of your highlights that you're looking forward to on this show.
Well, to be frank, if we talk about highlights, this was looking to essentially be kind of until fairly recently, a kind of a one match card, down to obviously, his face being on the poster, and even down to the color coding and the font and everything, all entirely being ordered around, Matt Cardona's run as NWA heavyweight champion. like a lot of people, I have been interested in, Cardona's current incarnation. The fact that he is able to sort of play kind of the same character within the NWA as he has been in GCW, and still come across to two very very different audiences and two very different styles of pro wrestling as the same sort of hateable heel champion. I think is a testament to how he's been able to reinvent himself. Of course, the problem here is that everything has been building up to a rematch between Cardona and former champion Nick Aldis. This has been the A1 storyline on NWA television for months. To kind of to make a WWE comparison, to almost like a Roman Reigns type level of the exclusion of everything else. So when we now have Cardona having a bicep injury and having to have surgery on that, it really has thrown this whole card kind of into disarray. Basically, for reading the tea leaves here, they are continuing to say that Cardona will be at the event. He will be present there. They are not saying that he is going to actually compete or be in a match. So I'm assuming we're going to have some sort of either postponement of the match, some sort of angle, maybe, having him relinquish the title, whatever it might be. But really, the entirety of this show has been built around that one match, which obviously isn't happening. I'm someone who will occasionally, like once a month, basically just binge and catch up with all of the NWA programming. And I'm entirely caught up to the point that, through Fight, I've seen the episode of Power that still I don't think will be airing on YouTube until later this evening. And to be frank, a lot of the matches that are technically on Always Ready are coming in entirely cold. They're not matches that have been pointed to or built towards on television, with a couple of exceptions. This is kind of a product of the taping schedule that the NWA runs, of kind of shooting 2, 3, sometimes even 4 weeks away from a pay-per-view, and then having to sort of, with whatever they have booked there or whatever they have filmed there, point towards the larger card, to the point that, in watching these last couple of shows, like as they aired, some matches were just coming in on the Chiron, literally kind of like correcting or amending the commentary that is happening live. Like, oh yeah, we've confirmed that match is happening, or no, this match is actually this other match that's going to be happening now. So, like, again, I'm somebody who, can kind of enjoy and appreciate the tone that NWA goes for. It's by no means my favorite or ideal form of wrestling, but it is something that is somewhat unique. But looking down the rest of the card, a lot of it is kind of has just sort of been announced on paper, and we're going to see what it happens to be. I don't know, Aaron Stevens versus Trevor Murdoch. Homicide versus PJ Hawks for the junior heavyweight, the Fixers versus the Mortons. Apparently, we're getting Sam Shaw making a post-release appearance in the NWA. Taya Valkyrie's going to be showing up to fight Natalia Markova. A couple of these things could be somewhat interesting for the dedicated NWA viewer, but I think the issue is that just with the way their TV is structured and the fact that the main event has been lost, a lot of it feels just to somebody who, again, puts the time into actually watching the product, still does feel kind of thrown together at the last minute.
Yeah, rather unfortunate. And I mean, if they're going to be charging people for the show without a proper main event really being out there, I mean, you have to think that they must have a make good that will be able to justify that.
I have to think they're sort of relying on the whole like Fight subscription plan right now, rather than a lot of individual buys. I'm one of those people who's like, sure, fine, $50 a year, fine, I'll go for it. But there is the way in which, and we certainly saw this, with the WWE Network. There is the way that can often kind of diminish your secondary or tertiary pay-per-views, right? They don't necessarily become appointment viewing.
So that is NWA Always Ready. That is taking place Saturday evening here, along with the UFC 275. John just did a preview of that last night, and I believe Eric and Phil will be here on the YouTube to go through that right after the event ends. But that's not all we're getting this weekend, because the weekend starts tonight with WWE SmackDown and AEW Rampage. Actually, quite a few things announced for SmackDown compared to usual here. We have Ricochet versus Gunther for the Intercontinental Championship. Bruce Lord, do we see Gunther's first WWE main roster championship win?
I think you have to at this point. I mean, the whole Roman situation that you guys have talked about just really puts the diminishment of the secondary titles in WWE into sharp relief. I mean, the whole it's a complete cliche at this point. Oh, why don't you elevate the IC title or whatever it might be? And we know it's because there's no interest in doing that. And there hasn't been interest in doing that for the past 10 or 15 years. But with the Roman situation now and him kind of being in the catbird seat in terms of being able to kind of pick and choose where your double champion is going to appear, if they actually want to actually try to rehabilitate this title, I don't think there's anybody better to do that than Gunter. I mean, look, we all love Ricochet to death, but he's in a sense he's the perfect IC champion because he's not presented with any degree of credibility. He isn't a threat. He doesn't show up on pay-per-views, and yet he's theoretically your now second in line champion within that company. So sure, let's strap up Gunter. Let's start putting him in, giving him some squash matches. Start giving him some actually compelling matches with other large dudes, and see if while Roman is away, you can build some sort of interest there. So. I don't think that's going to happen. I want to be clear about that. I don't think they're going to do that with a Gunter title reign, but there's the chance to do it if they want.
What they might have going for them this time is the fact that they are going to be potentially putting this belt on somebody who is a large man, and I think somebody like a large man in Vince McMahon's WWE always stands a better chance of being booked better than Ricochet, unfortunately. That is unless you can also dance, then you're going to be booked to dance as well, like Shanky is.
Maybe
so
he can do the waltz to the the classical pieces
Waltzer.
that he used to come out with.
Waltzer, that's new,
waltzing Walter. Oh,
the
God.
new gimmick. Yeah.
Oh, poor bastard.
We also have somebody's got to fill in for John in that department here on these shows. We also have Money in the Bank qualifying matches here with Drew McIntyre taking on Sheamus in our first of two. Also, on the other end, the long-awaited in-ring return of Lacey Evans as she takes on in another even longer-awaited in-ring return of Xia Li here. These two taking each other on in a Money in the Bank qualifying match. And all signs, I think, likely point to Lacey Evans, but I think we'll finally maybe get some clarity on who might be heel, who might be babyface in both of their situations.
I mean, the Lacey story has just been, it's one of those, the Lacey story is exactly why I continue to listen to you and John and other folks who watch main roster WWE product, even though I don't, because these sorts of confusing questions and just absolute disasters in terms of presentation are fascinating from the outside. And there is that part of me that will just be kind of, not going to watch it, but is going to be just, eating popcorn and listening to how this actually shakes out in terms of how they are going to present this woman, whether they are going to continue to steer into, the very real world and very traumatic, experiences that she's been referring to in the past, and then trying to get a sense of how that does or does not connect to a pro wrestling character, which is the whole thing has been so confusing, but also fascinating in exactly the sort of way that I do still find main roster WWE intriguing.
Also, Max Dupree is about to bring in some of his first clients to Maximum Male Models. Could it be Mansoor? Could it be Mace? Could it be name Brock Lesnar?
If there's one thing that this company lacks for Wai, it's like mid-level comedy. There's just not enough of that. There's not enough of that on WWE television right now. So I'm really glad to see they're addressing a needed deficit in their booking here.
Over on AEW Rampage, again, 10 o'clock start without hockey tonight. We have Will Ospreay making his in-ring debut in AEW. The man's going to have a pretty busy evening, wrestling here, and then all of a sudden just flying over to no, this is a taped edition of Rampage, everybody. But we have Will Ospreay and Aussie Open from the United Empire taking on FTR and Trent Beretta. That looks to be at least, one of the headlining bouts tonight. We also have Jake Hager versus Eddie Kingston, Red Velvet versus Chris Statlander. We hear from Hook and Danhausen, and we also see the debut of Satnam Singh and Jay Lethal in action. So, Yeah, what are you looking forward to the most tonight?
I think I'm really interested. I haven't read spoilers or anything like that, or even seen anything about crowd reactions. I think Aussie Open are a team who are kind of very much in the position that Takeshita was a couple of years, or excuse me, a couple of weeks ago, in that they are a very very seasoned, but also very like I think kind of American TV adjusted team who will get over very well with a North American audience who maybe hasn't seen them before. So I'm interested to see if they sort of take some people by surprise and make an impression there. It's Will Ospreay. I don't think we need to go into too much detail about that. I'm interested to see the Hagar match itself doesn't really interest me. I'm really interested to see if we get a sense as to whether or not Kingston will have a New Japan opponent at Forbidden Door, right? Obviously, through things like the long and winding Royal Road and everywhere else, we all know the reverence with which Kingston holds various traditions of Japanese wrestling. His match with Ishii that he had recently, was very enjoyable. So I'm kind of keen to see who his dance partner might be there. I like the story of this kind of like newer, darker, rebuilt, bigger, improved Statlander, kind of working her way through the baddies, ultimately heading towards Jade. I think if you do that correctly, you could have one of the first real kind of, I think, credible people who might possibly, defeat Jade. I don't know if necessarily the timing is right to do that now, given how still fresh the baddies angle and stable is, and obviously adding Stokely into the mix. I don't know if you'd want to defeat Jade, but one way or the other, Statlander and Jade is a program I'm interested in, and yeah, we're all going to see what the situation is with Jay Lethal's Giant, and the rubber has to hit the road at some point. So in a tag match, probably a little bit safer than the singles, but I'm not sure how this will go.
I want to thank Tom in the chat room here, alerting us that Game 4 of the NBA Finals between the Warriors and the Celtics takes place tonight, 9 p.m. start. So it will go up right against the second hour of SmackDown, as well as the entirety of Rampage. So look for that to take a big chunk out of the audience for both of those shows. And speaking of contributions from the Post Wrestling live chat here, thank you everybody who sent in a super chat. And we start off here with Camille Waters, who simply sends £1 just to send some support. Thank you so much, Camille. You don't even have a message, so we're just going to give you a bit of a shout out and thank you for that support. Aaron Bowman sends in $10, and he wants to say, Vince is a savant. He turned his company into a poor man's Disney World. My grandkids will be on the last ride roller coaster in the WWE Universe Amusement Park 2040. Timestamp it. Wow.
I mean, we've seen Nick Khan, sort of making these sorts of comparisons, right? That this is the sort of, version of the WWE that he imagines, the Marvel-esque universe in which you barely even need the actual physical wrestlers anymore, and you don't need, as Vince famously said, one of these days we're going to get rid of that damn ring. It's obviously a vision that of Nick's that is simpatico with Vince's. So yeah.
I mean, Canadians, at least in the Toronto area, know of the pile driver, the famed pile driver that used to be present at Niagara Falls.
Mm-hmm.
Never gone on it. I don't think I ever would have. I don't trust WWE amusement park ride. But
I mean, it's going back to the Carney roots, as much as Vince is talking about getting away from the whole Carney background, but ultimately we're just coming back to theme parks. It all yeah.
That is it. Aaron Bowman also sends $2 to say, Cody, I hate admitting, is can't miss right now. Would certainly agree, Aaron. Mm-hmm. This has honestly been a fantastic move for his career.
Some people are just better suited, to the WWE, right? I think, the Cody run in AEW obviously was great and exciting and completely rebooted and rebuilt him, and the Dustin match and loads of great TNT matches and everything. But we sort of saw how things were beginning to turn a little bit towards the end in terms of his own vision for his character, the sort of stories that he wanted to work with, and how the audience saw him. So as much as I am somebody who definitely prefers AEW's in-ring product and general approach to wrestling storytelling to the WWE's, some people just fit there.
And he will fit in AEW when the time is right as well. You
Yeah,
know, like the ability to bounce back and forth is really the entire appeal of having competition. So to see somebody take advantage of it and do it so successfully, only a few months in, I think is very encouraging for the industry and everybody who's looking for a job. Right.
that's what makes people like Flair and people like Jericho. That's why they're still household names. Yeah.
And finally, we got a Jake from the Windy City. Thank you, as always, Jake, for the support. He sends in 225 to simply let us know that Cody and Seth received 5 stars in this week's Wrestling Observer newsletter from Dave Meltzer. I agree. He says, do you agree, Bruce?
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of match I think that you know again, if we're talking about kind of the house style of the WWE, this is a case where, again, as we were talking about before, the real world circumstances ended up completely dovetailing perfectly with the type and sort of story and type of match, even that Cody and Seth were poised to deliver. Uh, Cody did not need to have some sort of a Bret Hart technical masterpiece, or like a strong style slugfest, or whatever it might be that the injury might have kept him from being able to do. If we're grading, I mean, we can get into a whole angels on the head of a pin hair splitting discussion about what star ratings are or what they should be, but I'm one of those people who believes that they should at least be taken in the context of what type of storytelling, what type of match this one company or this one wrestler is invested in and interested in, and by the criterias of a WWE main event, by the criterias of Cody and Seth's respective wrestling styles. Yeah, what else could you ask for?
And I believe Anarchy in the Arena also received 5 stars. So I believe just kind of to
Yeah,
that point,
there you
the
go.
wildly different matches with completely different sets of, I think, maybe technical maybe gradings, and but ultimately what matters is how invested was the audience in it, and for both of those cases it was very, very high. So thank you very much for that note, Jake. And before we get out of here, Bruce, you are awesome on these shows, but this is not the only show that you do on the Post Wrestling Network.
Yeah, no, that's right. Myself and my pal David Myers regularly put out episodes of Postmarks, generally about once a month, in which we speak with various members of the post wrestling community about their own wrestling fandoms, about their own histories with this, sport that we all love so much. And yeah, coming out tomorrow, we have our new episode featuring Brian Strelekis, who's a familiar voice to anybody who listens to the Friday night post shows. We talked with him about how his interests and tastes in wrestling have changed and evolved over a pretty lengthy period of time and across multiple genres, styles, and promotions. And he was able to share with us some pretty cool memories from some very notable matches and notable shows that he was able to see live in the Northeast. So again, that'll be out on the Patreon, the post Patreon feed, but is freely available for everyone, even non-patrons, to listen to.
That is correct. Yeah, you can download it by going to postwrestlingcafe.com or simply follow our social media at Post Wrestling, and we will send links. That's set to, I think, debut at about like 12 Eastern time on Saturday afternoon, but it is available for everybody to listen to. So you and David are tremendous interviewers, and I've really enjoyed every single one of these podcasts that you guys have done. Last episode, speaking with Karen Peterson, who is in the chat room. Hello, Karen, there right now. Always really interesting stuff that you guys managed to pull from. I think very relatable stories of like people's fandoms of professional wrestling, how they encounter communities like these ones. So it's a very, they're often like just kind of like nice little in some cases like very heart-wrenching conversations, but also comforting situations to know how similar we all ultimately all are.
Yeah.
And that is it for me. I will be back tonight with John Pollock for Rewind of SmackDown, 11 p.m. Eastern time in the Post Wrestling Cafe, available to all patrons. And you can catch all of our coverage on the website as well as on the podcast feed and the YouTube channel. Like and subscribe. And that is all. I'm out of words. Goodbye.